Welcome to Scratch 2. We're going to build the classic game Moonlander. We're also going to learn how to interact with our characters in real time. Just as a reminder, when I am talking, the hope is that you'll be listening and watching what I'm doing. At the end of that, I will undo everything I've done and redo it, and that time you can follow along. It works a lot better this way, so try and remember to watch the first time and then do the second time. So, without too much further ado, let's get started. So we want to open up our browser and we want to navigate to scratch.mit.edu. And when we're here, we want to go to create and we're ready to go. The first thing I want to do is I want to pick out the backdrop we want to use for our project. I'm going to be using the space backdrop. So if I go to the backdrops and I say choose a backdrop, and I'm just going to search for, I can just put this button here for space, and I'm going to grab this moon. The problem I have with this moon is it's really kind of hard to see where you might be landing. Most of it's moon, so we actually need to edit a little bit. So what we're going to do is going to click on paint, and then we're going to click on the moon that we have. I'm actually going to delete these other two, so I just want the moon here. And I want to kind of stretch this to fill. So what I'm going to do is, because this is all kind of black up here, I'm going to first convert this to a vector so I can work with it a little more easily. Then I'm going to pull this down a bit, so I only have a little bit of moon on the bottom. And next I'm going to fill this with black. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to grab this rectangle object and I'm going to paint it here. And I'm going to change its fill to black. Okay, and that looks pretty good, so we can be done with that. So hit back here to get back to the code, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is I need to get our different character. We're not going to be landing Scratchy, we're going to be landing a rocket ship. So let's click on this Choose a Sprite button, and we need to find our rocket ship. This time we have to search for rocket. So R-O-C-K, here we go, rocket ship. So that's the rocket ship we're going to use, and he's kind of right on top of Scratchy. So let's get rid of Scratchy now. So if we click on Scratchy here, we can click on this trash can, and he's gone. Okay, so the next thing here is this rocket ship's really big for this. We need to make it a lot smaller. This is one of the things that has changed from Scratch 2 to Scratch 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this size here, and we're going to pick a size that seems about right. So this looks like it might be 1/4 is about the size. Okay, no, that's a little bit too small. So let's try maybe 50%. Yeah, that looks pretty good. That's a nice distance for it to fall and land, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we have our background on a rocket ship. There's some costumes inside of our rocket ship we need to change. So with our rocket ship selected here, let's click on this costumes tab, and I want to get rid of these 3 costumes. The reason is this has the rocket ship kind of spinning as it goes, and the animations we're doing that's kind of detracting actually. So I'm going to get rid of 2, 2, 2. I'm going to get rid of everything but just one of them with him facing forward, and also the one where it looks like he's landed. So what I need to do now is I need to make a few more of these. So we need at least one more of these where he's got the flame, and then we need one more of these. Sorry, we need one more of these here for when he's wrecked. So let's go deal with the flames first. So I'm going to name these as we go. So I'm going to say this is rocket ship thrust 1, and this is rocket ship thrust 2, and this is rocket ship. It's kind of the default one. So this would be the rocket ship falling or landed, and this is going to be rocket ship crashed. Okay. So in order for the illusion of the flame to work, we just need to change the flame just a little bit. So I'm going to go on to the second one, and I'm going to zoom in a bit because it's a little bit easier to work with when you're zoomed in. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move some things around. So I'm going to grab this thing here. Okay, this is group, so let's ungroup it. Okay, and then I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to move him, maybe over here. And then I think this is pretty good. I'm going to move this around a little bit, but I'm going to reshape them too. And so now I've got those kind of moved around where I want them. The next thing I want to do is I want to pick this reshape tool, and I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to move these dots to kind of change the shape. So I'm going to make this a little more concave right here. Oops. Control Z. There we go. Make sure you have just one on the line. There we go. Click and drag. Okay, so I made that a little bit different shape. Let's do the same thing over here. So I want to pull in this side just a hair. And I'm going to pull in this side just a bit. And finally this side just a little bit. Okay, and then get the blue outline to match it. So I have to click on it and then move it. Okay, and then over here. Okay, but I do also need to change the shape of this just a tiny bit. So I'm going to make a more narrow version of this. So I'm going to start with the most innermost section. So I have it selected, and I select one of the dots, and then I can move it just a little bit. Okay, and this looks like it's the inner fill, which is fine. Okay, and then I'll click on this line here and move it in a little bit too. Move it out a little bit too. And we don't have to make a big change here. Just enough of the points just to make it look a little bit different is going to get our effect across. You can see I'm clicking on the inside and outside of the shape. Okay, so now let's do this middle section here. So this is going to come in a little bit because I want it a bit narrower. Oops, Control Z. Okay, and then a little bit on this side too. All right, and now I want to get this part. So you can see when I can click on either side of this blue line. It gives me a different set of dots. So you kind of have to maneuver both of them. So I'm going to start the inside first. I'm just going to have the inside come and meet. Just kind of move it just kind of straight over as I can, just kind of meet the yellow. Okay, and then on this side, the same thing. There we go. Have to get all of them, or it doesn't really kind of work too well. Okay, nearly there. Just a couple more dots to do. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to shrink the size. Ooh. Make sure you have the dot selected before you start moving stuff. I'll turn a solid color when it's selected. If you don't need a dot, you can double click it and it goes away. I think we can probably do with like half the number of dots on this line. And this one I'm going to change its shape just a little bit. There we go. Okay, and this side. Ooh, moved it. Didn't want to move. There we go. Okay, so let's go back to regular zoom, and to see if the effect we're going for works pretty well, you can just swap back and forth between these two. And yeah, you can see it works a little bit. I think I want to move this cloud just a little bit more, so I'm going to do that real quick. That one didn't quite change enough, and I think if I change position on it, it'll be just perfect. So I'm going to move this guy out a little bit. This one too, just move them out a little bit. This one's actually going to start up here. There, let's try that. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Okay, so we're gonna go back and we're gonna go through this again, and this time you guys follow along. So let's start with the background. So the first thing I did is I went to choose a backdrop, and I went to space, and I chose the moon. Okay, the next thing I did is in backdrops, I deleted all the empty ones. And I told this backdrop I want it to convert to vector with this button right here, convert to vector. And with my arrow selected, I click on it and then I can drag it down. So I'm going to drag it down, drag it down. I just want just a little bit of moon on the bottom here. And to fix the top part, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a black filled rectangle above it, kind of like that. Okay, and that's how we do the backdrop. For the rocket ship, we're going to say choose a sprite, and we're going to search for a rocket and grab the rocket ship. Inside the costumes tab here, for the rocket ship we just created, we want to delete B, C, and D. So we're going to delete B, delete C, and delete D. Then we're going to right click, say duplicate on this one, and right click, say duplicate on this one. Okay, so next thing we want to do is we want to change this up a little bit. So just I zoomed in a bit, and with this tool I can move it. I had to ungroup it first, so ungroup that. Then now I can move some of these bits around, rotate them a little bit if I want. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to do that, and then also to reshape the rocket ship with the reshape tool here. And just a reminder, if you double click some of the points, it'll delete them. By default, this comes with probably way too many points, so it's not bad to kind of delete some of the points you don't need. So go ahead and take a minute and make that second flame. Okay, so next thing we need to do is we need to resize this. I think a value about 50 looks about right for this. And that catches us up with the exception of we want to delete the scratch if he's still there. So I'm going to delete this new rocket ship and we're going to go back to one I was working on. And the next thing I want to do here is this crashed one. Well, this looks like a pretty pristine rocket ship, so we're going to have to mess it up a bit. So let's zoom in a little bit and let's severely mess up this guy. So the best tool for this is probably this Reshape tool again. And we're going to just kind of zoom in on a bit and cause problems. So I'm going to get rid of a bunch of these dots. And I'm actually pull it clear over here. And I'm going to move it so it's like that. And so that looks pretty messed up there. Yeah. And then this is too pristine. Let's break this down a little bit. Get rid of some of these dots. Maybe. Yeah, move that a little bit. And that's too big. Let's pull it in a bit. Because it gets crumpled in more than anything, right? So let's just, use your imagination and mess it up pretty good. So I imagine this thing is going to be really bent up. So I'm going to just delete a bunch of dots until I get up quite a bit. Okay, and then for this one, there's going to be a lot of this. And the great thing about this one is the perfection really doesn't matter. It's meant to look kind of broken, so that's what we're doing. Okay, so let's break this one as well. So I've got this guy out here, like that, and this guy's following. And let's get rid of that tip. This is way too clean of a tip. Oh, actually, I'm going to let that stay. Shift the rocket ship a little bit. There we go. And then I think the window is going to get messed up a little bit too. So let's mess this up a little bit. Okay. Looks like it's grouped. There we go. Ungroup it. So we can continue our work here. Okay, so go ahead and take a minute and work on messing up your rocket yourself, and I'm going to continue working on mine, and then we'll regroup after that. So I'm happy with the level of destruction I have on my ship. And so the next thing we want to do is we want to add a few variables to our sprite. So if we click back here on the code button and we scroll down to variables, then there's this make a variable button, which we're going to press. The first variable I want to make is called gravity. Now when I made this variable, you'll notice I have a new item here. It says gravity, and it's got a little checkbox next to it. That checkbox indicates whether or not we want to display it on our board. So if you notice over here, we have this gravity right here that gives us our current value. That's going to be very handy for some of the other things we're doing, but we don't want to show gravity for this for now. So I'm going to uncheck gravity. But we do want several other variables made for our sprite. Fuel. Okay, and then we want to make velocity. Height. So we want to be able to see our fuel, we want to see our velocity, we want to see our height. So take a minute and create the variables velocity, height, gravity, and fuel. And while waiting, I'm going to just delete my variable. Okay, so let's move on now. As you may have guessed, we might want to initialize these variables. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go to the event blocks and grab a one flag clicked. Then I'm going to go back to my variables and I'm going to say set. And I'm going to grab 3 of these. And I want to reset my fuel to, we're going to give them 1,000 liters of fuel to begin with. Okay. And then I'm going to set the gravity. And we know that on the moon, gravity is approximately 1.62 meters per second squared. So I'm going to put this to 1.62. And next I need to reset my height. I'm not sure quite what to set this value to yet. So I need to figure that out. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to grab this sprite and I'm going to move him to where I think he should start initially in the game. About, here, say. And you'll notice that the positions down here update as I move them around. So if I move him here, it's there, here, there. So I'm going to say, you're going to start the game about right there. So that's 134. So I'm going to say set height to 134. Okay. So now let's work on having the rocket start falling. As I previously mentioned, the gravity for the moon is about 1.62 meters per second squared. What that means is that in 1 second of free fall, the first second specifically, in 1 second you will have dropped 1.62 meters from the height of your fall to 1.62 meters later in 1 second. Now, for second number 2, you're already traveling at 1.62 meters per second. But we're going to, in the next second, make that 1.62 more meters per second we're falling towards the ground. So as we keep on falling, every second we add that to our velocity. So that makes gravity work pretty easy with velocity. Basically, for every second of free fall, we increase our velocity by the gravity constant of 1.62. So what we need to do is we need to make some kind of loop for while we're falling. And in that loop, we need to change our velocity. To do this, we're going to define a custom block. So we're going to go to the My Blocks tab here, and we're going to make a block. And we're just going to create, we're going to call this block Freefall. And in Freefall, we're going to let gravity work. So we're going to do a repeat. So we need a control, and we need a repeat until block, which is right here. And the condition we're going to use is based off of height. So while our height is going, so we have while our height is less than, go back to variables, grab our height, hover over here, drop it in. And we don't know what this variable is yet either. So let's look at that real quick. So where is it that we're going to land? Let's pull this guy down. And I'm going to say he's going to land about here. So we can see that the place where we want it to actually land is somewhere about -135. So I'm going to put -135. So we're going to repeat this free fall until our height is less than -135. So let's do that. So we know that every second we need to do something. So first thing we need to do is have a wait 1 second in there, right? Because every 1 second we want to change our velocity. And then in the variables here, we want to do a change velocity by gravity. So next thing we need to do is have the free fall apply to our ship here. And what we do is we want to just add a real quick change height by, and we want to change it by our velocity. But we want our height to go in the downward direction. So we need to multiply our height by -1 before changing by velocity. So we need to go to operators, grab this multiplication, stick it here, say -1 times, so back to our variables, -1 times our velocity is going to be our new height. And then to apply the height to the rocket ship, all we have to do is go into motion and say set y2, and y is going to be equal to our height. So back in variables, our height. Okay, so now we have this free fall block defined. Let's talk about it for a second. This main thing right here is kind of a big repeat until loop. It's going to happen until we hit the bottom. This is what's called a game loop. Games have all kinds of loops in them. And these loops, there's main game loops and there's sub loops and things, but these loops helps do things incrementally. This loop in particular is going to simulate our gravity. All we need to do to use our loop is just kind of add it here. And now when we click, we should see our ship start falling. Now look real carefully. Can you see how it's kind of really choppy on its way down? It's not exactly a smooth transition from slowly falling to falling quickly. It's just kind of, that's happening because we have this wait 1 second inside here. We took the formula very literally, and we said every 1 second we need to change velocity by the value of our gravity. But we need this to happen a lot more frequently. So what we really need to do is we need to scale this so it's happening a lot more often. The way we do that is we're going to add a multiplier to this. So we're going to say for every 0.1 seconds. Now our value of gravity is a little bit off, so we have to multiply that as well. So let's go grab an operator here, and we're going to pull gravity out for a moment, plop them in here, and then put this block in here. And we're going to times this by 0.1 as well. Now, when I hit the flag, well, you see it fell a lot quicker than I was expecting. And the reason why that happened is we forgot to initialize velocity. So let's go back to variables, and let's say set velocity to 0. And let's try this again. Okay, you can see now we have a much smoother falling action happening on our spacecraft. And the cool thing is, if we want to make it even more smooth, we could do that as well. So we could add a 0.1 here, and we could make this 0.01 as well. And we could run it again. And you see it's even a little bit more smooth. And I think in our case, this is plenty smooth enough. So you see we drop all the way down to, boom, there. So a thing that's going to be kind of confusing for the game and that we need to fix is it now says our height is negative 135. The reason it says 135 is because our landing spot we put in here was about, negative 135. So we want this to show 0 because it's still going to be, no matter what terrain you're landing on, a little bit hard to see. And 0 really means we've landed. So we need to adjust this number on our height. And the way we're going to do that is when we show the height, or when we use the height, it's actually going to be height plus 135. So what we really want to do is add 135 to our height, and then that way we can just subtract it off to convert from between the height, actual height, and the XY coordinate height. So that's what we're going to do now. So for example, here where we say set Y to height, we're going to pull out height for a moment. We're going to go to our operators and we're going to add so we're going to set Y to negative 135 plus height. And same thing here. We're going to add, actually we're just going to change this to 0. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is this height, we need to add to that the 134 plus the 135. And now we should see nice smooth value down to 0. There we go. Okay. So we're nearly there. We need to make it so we can do a thruster. So let's do that next. And we need to make sure he crashes, and we'll do that after that. But in the meantime, what I want you to do is simply copy what I have now on the screen. So just make sure we have this freefall block defined like this. Make sure we have adjusted the height, both here and here, and go to that point. So let's continue. The next thing we want to do is add the ability to activate our thruster. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to the Events tab here, and we're going to grab one button is clicked. And I'm going to make it the down button. You could make it any button you'd like, but I think the down arrow makes sense as to activate the rocket or not. And on this block, what we're going to do, zoom in a little bit here. Let's see. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're not landed, because if we're landed, we're not going to activate our rocket. So we just need an if statement to start out. Okay, and the if statement basically says if we have any height. So if height is greater than 1. So on the operators, we can go greater than, put that in here. So as long as height, which we get in our variables tab here, so height, well, our height is greater than 1, then we need to do stuff. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to change velocity by 1. So change velocity by a positive 1. Sorry, actually, it's going to be a negative 1. So change velocity by a negative 1, and that should decrease our velocity. Next, what we want to do is we want to change our costume so we're in the thruster costume. So I am going to go to looks. I am going to say switch costume to, and I'm going to pick out thrust 1. And I want to wait just a tiny little bit of time, and I'll switch to thrust 2 as well. So I'm going to go to Control and wait. And I'm just going to wait for 0.1 seconds, and then let me switch to the other costume. But I'm going to do this again, so I'm going to grab a second wait while I'm here. Also make this 0.1. And back on the switch costume, I'm going to grab rocket ship thrust 2. And then when I'm done, I'm going to switch to rocket ship just regular plane. So let's give this a try, make sure it works correctly. So I'm going to push the down arrow. You see I got a little bit of jolt in velocity. Okay, so it's working. So let's stop that for now. One thing we should probably also do while we're here is initialize our rocket ship to the right costume when we start. So grab switch costume 2 and put this on the regular rocket ship. So that way if we crashed, we don't start out as a crashed position. Okay, so before we move on, I want you to take a moment and build this new block, and also make sure to add this switch costume to rocket ship. So after you've done that, we'll continue by figuring out whether we landed or crashed. Okay, so now let's finish the game. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this block of code out of our way a little bit, because we're going to focus on what happens after we're done free falling. So after the free fall, we want to check to see whether or not we survived the crash or we didn't. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to see if our velocity is greater than about 2 meters per second. Any faster than that, then the rocket would surely have crashed. Well, first thing we need to do is add just a little bit of a delay. The reason we need to add the delay is because if they're in this loop when they hit the bottom, then we want it to work correctly where you have the right costume to end on. And then we just need an if statement, the if-else statement. What we want to do is we want to see if our velocity is greater than 2 meters per second. So if I come here to operators and I grab a greater than and I put it in here, and I go to variables and I look for velocity, and I change that 50 to be 2. So if our velocity is greater than 2, then we know we crashed. So this is where we died. This is where we were triumphant. If we died, what I want to do is I want to put the costume to the messed up rocket. So let's do that. So set costume. Oops, that's looks. So set costume to rocket ship crashed. And I also want to kind of play a crashed sound. So what I'm going to do is click on the sounds tab. I'm going to find a sound that's going to work here. So I want to add a sound. So I'm going to say choose sound, and we want space sounds, and I'm going to grab this boom cloud sound. And I want to add another sound as well for if we win. So I'm going to say choose sound there, and I want space, and I want to grab this teleport sound. Okay, so back here on our code, we want to play that sound. So on the sound tab, we're going to say start sound, and this is the bad sound. Remember, that's boom cloud. Okay, on the other hand, if we won, I want to play a different sound. I'm going to play teleport. And also if we won, I want to make sure our rocket ship is not in a thruster state. So I'm going to grab switch costume to rocket ship. Okay, so let's see if this works. Okay, so I landed successfully. Let's see what happens if I just let it fall. So my velocity is now over 2, so I'm going to crash for sure. There we go. Okay, so now we have that. There's only one more thing we need. You'll notice we have this fuel up here that we're never using. So we need to add a way to burn fuel when we're using it. And if we don't have any fuel to burn, then we can't go anymore. And so what we're going to do is do that in a minute. But before that, take a minute, and I want you to copy this end sequence here. Feel free to swap out whatever sound you'd like. I think these work pretty good, but feel free to swap out for whatever sound you'd like to use. And we'll go to that point. Okay, so let's move on. So we're going to focus our efforts here on this area here. And this is going to be really easy, but all I'm going to do is add a couple little things here. First thing I want to do is add an if statement. Because we only want to do this if and only if we have fuel. So I'm adding the if statement there. So let's say fuel is greater than 0. So back to operators, find greater than, and variables, find fuel. So while fuel is greater than 0, then we'll allow them to do this. But then we also need to use up the fuel. So we need to grab a change fuel by and stick it right under there. And instead of by 1, we're going to decrement 1. So what that means now is when I start and I use up some fuel, you see it decrements it. Okay, another adjustment I want to make while we're at it is I'm getting way too much thrust per burn. So I'm going to change this velocity. So instead of by 0.1, what I'm going to do is do it by 0.2. So hopefully that will make it work a little better, a little less thrust when I hit it. So let's try that. There we go. Okay, so let's see if I can land the thing. Okay, so the game is essentially complete at this point, but I do want to add another little thing. I think it really helps to have a little bit of a game sound loop in the background. Adding a bit of sound to the game helps a lot. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is kind of make the sound its own little program. So I'm going to zoom out and just kind of find a blank space, and I'm going to work in that blank space. And I'm going to go in the events, grab when flag is clicked. And then on control, I'm going to say, see, we want to repeat until. And I want to repeat until the game's over. So I'm going to do that by the same way we've done it every other time. I'm going to say repeat until. Oh, actually I want one of these. Repeat until height is less than 0 or less than 1. So variables, grab height, less than 0. And on sounds, I want to play a sound and repeat. So before I do that, I need to find a good sound. So let's go back to sounds for a moment. And there's some great loops in here. And it's just a matter of finding a good one. So you can go in space and we can look at some of these, but most of these aren't really good loops. This isn't bad, But it's not music, it's just kind of a sound effect. So let's go to these loops and let's see. Let's find something good here. Okay, so the loop I think I'm going to use is this mystery loop here. So let's grab that. And back in our code, now I can say play sound, mystery until done. One other thing we want to do though is we want to stop the game sound when we crash or land. So right after we free fall, I'm going to stop that loop. And I'm going to say stop all sounds and then do that. So now we should have some game music. And then when we crash, the music should stop and I should only hear the crash sound. Okay, and our code is completed. So let me bring this into here. So this is all the code we wrote. And it wasn't too bad. What I would encourage you to do now is after you take a minute and you add the ending sounds, think of some other ways you can enhance this game. For example, this is the gravity for the moon, but maybe you can practice landing on all kinds of different planets. Or maybe you have to land in a certain place on the moon. You have to use left and right, and that uses fuel as well. Think of ways you can enhance the game by yourself based on the principles that you've learned in this. And again, if you have any questions, please post in our forum. I hope you enjoyed the project. Thank you.